Sorry, cousin. There are people getting every day around the world. You're just looking for excuses for your sociopathic lack of empathy, okay? You don't need any. Just say you're an asshole and move on. And in the process, you will have your rights removed piece by piece. Go ahead. You'll assume that, like, oh, well, as long as I never speak out against my lordship, I'll be fine. Like, do you condemn October 7, Hamas for October 7 attacks? Norman Finkelstein responds. This is a 15-minute conversation with an American citizen of Jewish descent who is the descendant of Holocaust survivors having an academic conversation on a podcast. Is very different set of standards for Mahmoud Khalil than Norm Finkelstein on a CNN hit after he was released the original crime, in air quotes, of speaking out against Israel to begin with.
Second question that I struggle with, and this is the notorious question of condemnation. Do you condemn what Hamas did on October 7th? And you have a very interesting answer to this. You've said that I think it's a question mark how Hamas on October 7th is going to be regarded in the future. You have drawn parallels to the slave rebellions of 1831 when Nat Turner explicitly targeted whites. And objectively, it was a horrific act of violence, atrocious, but despite that, Frederick Douglass has said that you can draw a straight line from Nat Turner.
No, Frederick Douglass said you can draw a straight line from John Brown to the Civil War. But John Brown says he was inspired by Nat Turner.
Right.
So you could say on a trajectory, Nat Turner was 1 point, John Brown was a second point,
Fuck
the
you.
Civil War, the third point.
Okay, so by extension, you can draw that line from Nat Turner to John Brown to the Civil War, and then from there to the abolition of slavery and the Emancipation Proclamation. Objectively positive outcomes. So despite Nat Turner committing this condemnable act of violence, now he occupies an honored place in history.
Yeah.
And you say, in light of that, it's a question mark.
Yeah.
What place Hamas on October 7th is going to occupy in history? Before I tell you where I struggle with this argument, I just want to check with you. Have I summarized your stance correctly? Have I missed anything?
That's correct.
Okay, great. This is where I struggle with this argument. Frederick Douglass was able to see a line connecting John Brown to the Civil War, and we're able to see that influence John Brown had from Nat Turner. But if I try to apply the same protocol to other acts of violence that I condemn, then it dilutes everything. And then I lose free will, no accountability, there's complete chaos. I'll give you a very intentionally extreme example. In 1978, after the Saur Revolution, the United States funded the rise of the Mujahideen to oppose the Soviet Union and the Soviet-backed People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, the PDPA. By funding the Mujahideen, they also funded the rise of this man named Osama bin Laden, who broke out from the Mujahideen and formed Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda declared war on the US. They took great offense to the United States military presence in Saudi Arabia after the Gulf War, the Kuwait War. They opposed US funding and support for Israel. They opposed the sanctions on Iraq. And then the US involvement in multiple Islamic countries. Declared war on the US. That led to 9/11. You already know where I'm going with this. You can draw a straight line from the US funding of the Mujahideen to Osama bin Laden, to Al-Qaeda, to 9/11. And I'm saying, I don't care about the context and I don't care where the line is drawn. I grew up in the Middle East. So I completely agree with you that the United States destroyed Afghanistan, destroyed Iraq, has destroyed Palestine, is destroying Iran. I think the United States is directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians. Their policy has been a lot more. Their policy has been nefarious and they have blood on their hands. I completely agree with you. But despite that context, I don't think it's a question mark what place 9/11 holds in history. Even if you draw that line all the way to 9/11, there's no question mark in my mind. It was a horrific act. It was an act of violence, and there's no question mark what place it occupies in history.
I think you missed a couple of things. First of all, I've never said it wasn't a horrific thing. I've repeatedly said there can be no question that atrocities of a significant magnitude occurred on October 7th. As of now, people still debate to what extent Israel was responsible for the atrocities in October 7th, I would say based on the currently available information, the only reasonable conclusion is that overwhelmingly the civilian deaths that occurred on October 7th were due to the actions of Hamas.
It's so funny to somehow tie America's invasion of Iraq to 9/11. Like, that's wild. Okay? Because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Like, that's not even a position that the average American believes any longer. That was barely a position that Americans believed back then.
Of Gaza militants. However, as I said, number one, I recognize those were atrocities and they can't be characterized as anything but. But there's, in my opinion, a distinction to be made between an acknowledgement of the atrocities and a condemnation of those who perpetrated the atrocities. So let me try to concretize that. We have the case of Nat Turner. He's born a slave, and it happens he's a very smart guy. It is. Everybody said about Nat Turner, white and black, they all said, that Nat's a very smart guy. The fellow who famously wrote his confession, there was the Confessions of Nat Turner. He said that he rarely met a person, black or white, who was as smart as this guy, okay? And Nat Turner was not unaware of his natural gifts, those endowments from God or from whoever you believe they came. And he knew that, bar a miracle, he would never be able to realize any of his gifts, any of his talents. He was born a slave, he would live as a slave, and he was going to die as a slave. Now, in his mind, there was no other option than to commit some sort of mass killing in order either to inspire an uprising or to foment an uprising or to transmit a message to the white population that if you don't end this slavery, this is what you risk. This is what's on for you. He thought those were the only two, that was the only option for him, kill all white people, though he said later, and nobody disputes it, he said once we got a firm grounding, he would stop killing whites, innocent whites, civilians. But he felt as a tactical matter, the only option he had at the beginning was to carry out this gruesome, ghastly massacre of white people, men, women, and children. Mm-hmm. So let's say you were in the court of law and you...
Can you imagine? Like, Mahmoud Khalil, why don't you do this 15-minute response?
You were the prosecutor. And Nat Turner was on the witness stand. You are white.
On CNN.
You represent, you embody, you incarnate this whole system of slavery. You're part of it. You're part of the machinery of slavery. Okay? And do you believe?
So ultimately, what is the end goal for both sides? What is it they both want or one wants, etc.? And with the high chance of sounding like an asshole, why should I care? I'm going to be honest with you, chatter. I hope you enjoy your society collapsing in front of your eyes as you go down and sedate yourself in this assumption that it's actually the Polish and the Muslims that are ruining British civilization and British society. You deserve it. Sorry, at the risk of sounding like an asshole, let me tell you something. You are an asshole. You're a goddamn peasant, okay? You have peasant mindset. You don't understand that your tax dollars are funding the death and destruction of children overseas, and that alone is not enough for you to go, yeah, mate, I don't think it's a good idea to do that. Maybe we should fix the trains so that they run on time. But instead of that, you're going, my lordship, take more of my tithing. I've worked hard for this grain, my lordship. Give it to Israel. The biblical land, me lord. Okay, I don't believe that. What do you mean? Why should anybody care about this? It's like saying, why should anybody care about the Nazis doing the Holocaust, dude? What are you talking about? Why are you so comfortable showcasing your lack of humanity? That's number one. Number two, there is already a selfish argument against Israel here as well. Why the do you think it's appropriate for a goddamn foreign state that's propped up by your stupid inbred island originally, and now my inbred country now that is endlessly destabilizing this region, drawing a shit ton of enmity, and also creating a refugee crisis on a daily basis? Are you stupid? They're getting unlimited support, and on top of that, they're laughing at you, and on top of that, they get to control what you can and can't say in England. They're locking up people, your goddamn grandparents, for 14 years in prison because they dared say Palestine Action, the only group that is engaging in direct action against Israel's genocide, is actually a terrorist group like it's ISIS or something. Now you got 83-year-old grandmothers going to jail for saying that the Palestine Action is actually right and correct. Why this specifically, though? Not like child labor in China or child exploitation around other parts in the world? What are you saying? What do you mean child labor in China, you dingus? Use a different example. Oh my God. Oh my God. Why do you think this is an appropriate response? You're like, you know what this feels like to me? Your cousin gets, and then your cousin's like, I just got this person, and you go, well, can you talk about all the other times that other people have gotten raped? Why should I care about you being by this person? Why should I even choose to apprehend this person? Why should I say anything at all? Are you stupid? Sorry, cousin. There are people getting every day around the world. You're just looking for excuses for your sociopathic lack of empathy, okay? You don't need any. Just say you're an asshole and move on. And in the process, you will have your rights removed piece by piece. Go ahead. You'll assume that like, oh, well, as long as I never speak out against my lordship, I'll be fine. Yes, very nice. And then they'll just take more and more of your taxable revenue in support of their endless conquest. It seems like a great bargain, okay? After all, there's other issues happening all around the world, so God forbid you focus on this one, okay? Don't do it. You're in the Epstein files. Calm down or you will go bald. Daddy chill. There's child labor everywhere, especially in Hasan's basement. Hasan in the Epstein files. You're in the Epstein files. As what, a victim, dumbass? This doesn't even make like sense from a timeline. What do you mean? When Jeffrey Epstein was operating, I was like 10 years old in Turkey, you moron. To the extent that people writ large are only capable of caring about one particular issue at a time, something that's not true except as a matter of projection from those whom that actually applies. Children being bombed is technically a more pressing matter than child labor, but I'm meeting the chatter on a completely fucked ideological field, so it doesn't really matter. No, that person is just simply looking desperately for an excuse to not have any sort of like serious, like that person is just trying to save themselves, or rather have someone basically say, oh no, you're actually a good guy. You're totally fine. What is this? With the risk of sounding like an asshole. No, this is the same dumb nonsense. It's just whataboutism. It's like, well, child labor is happening. Yeah, I can see what happened with this guy, by the way. I don't think this person is actually a cynical nihilist. I think this person is an Israel dick rider, especially considering that he was in this community and then noticeably left and only returned only recently. Only this year did he return. Suspiciously left the community, even though he was following since January 20th, 2021. Suspiciously left the community after October 7th, it seems. How about playing the video, dumb? Okay, here you go. No, this person's not in the bargaining phase of acceptance. He just wants to be heard. He wants to show everybody how big of an asshole he is. That's it.
That you could interrogate Nat Turner.
He wants
sitting
attention
on the witness stand and indignantly saying to him, Nat Turner, do you realize what a horrible crime you committed? Do you realize how beastly, how bestial, how uncivilized your action was? So I ask you, do you believe that you occupied the moral high ground such that you could scold and reprimand in indignant cadences what Nat Turner did? Or would you have sufficient moral self-awareness to say, you know, what happened was horrible, but then full stop? Because you had no right, knowing as you did what slavery was, knowing as you did the life he had lived and the prospects that he faced of slavery to earthly eternity.
Your haters are just so stupid, man. What is this?
You should be required to submit a video of you doing.
Hasan says you can't have an opinion on his opinions unless you clear a certain bench. If you can't clear 225 at least, a decent 6 or 7, you should not be able to have any opinions on what I say. No, I meant it sincerely. I'm glad that 95% of the commentary surrounding myself online is just people being like, he is incapable of saying something with in sincerity. He is incapable of saying something sarcastically. You know what I mean? Like so much of this just unironically revolves around just being like, oh, you're incapable of making a joke. I don't believe it. I don't agree. I think you said that seriously.
You had no right to criticize him. You can criticize the act, but you don't have the moral high ground to criticize him, which is exactly why the white abolitionists, those who opposed slavery at the time, they condemned the act, but they stopped short of condemning Nat Turner. On the contrary, they reserved all of their venom and indignation at the whites, saying, we told you so. We warned you. We warned you again and again and again. If you treat people this way, don't be surprised at what they might do. And when I read that by people like William Lloyd Garrison, who was one of the leading abolitionist figures, I thought to myself, that was the correct moral approach. A version of condemn the sin, but not the sinner. This is a version of it. You can condemn what was done, but you don't have the moral high ground to condemn the perpetrators. Because I spent a large part of my life, a small part of which can be seen here, just reading the reports on Gaza and what was being done to those people. And I, not because of some flamboyant radicalism or radicalness or trying to show how holier than thou and how pure I am, or trying to win points with Hezbollah or Hamas. No, I just said I couldn't do it. I know too much. One of the titles of one of my books was called Knowing Too Much. And it was about why American Jews were distancing themselves from Israel. Namely, they know too much about how ugly that regime is. And I knew too much about Gaza. I knew too much. There was no way on God's earth, and I would have regarded it as a complete and total betrayal of the values imparted to me by my parents based on their life experience, were I to take the easy route and say, and do you condemn what happened? Yes, I condemn it, but we have to remember this and have to remember that. No, I was not going to even grant. Many people like Bernie Sanders would say, what happened October 7th, but we have to remember the Palestinian this and Palestinian that. And you start by condemning October 7th. That was sort of the gate. You had to pass through that gate in order to be part of the conversation. If you wouldn't do the condemnation, you're not part of the conversation. And I wouldn't do the condemnation, not because I wanted to strike a radical pose. I knew too much. And I knew exactly that was why the abolitionists couldn't condemn Nat Turner. Because they walked in the streets. They saw the slave auctions. They saw the humiliation, the degradation, the destruction of the lives of a whole people. It was right before their eyes.
Yeah, what do you expect? What do you expect people to do when you push them to this corner? When you push them to react this way, and then you turn around and expect condemnations? It's ridiculous. This is what I said on October 8th. I was right then, and I'm right now. The idea that like the responsibility and the blame should be laid in the hands of the Palestinian population for how they choose to resist is completely avoiding the reasons as to why the Palestinian resistance has formed and why it has become a violent force capable of committing atrocities on October 7. And just like Norm Finkelstein, I recognize that there were acts of violence that would be considered terror. That would be considered terrorist by like the already vague definitional standards on October 7. Having said that, that is not even remotely a fraction of the violence that the Palestinians have historically been subjected to. The violence that created the conditions for October 7 to begin with. Dude, shut up. Oh my God, Mods, ban this loser. Jesus Christ. Oh my God, dude. Oh, me. Oh my God. He's like, oh, you're making it so hard for me. I want to understand where you're coming from, but you're making it so hard. It's like, dude, there's 30,000 in here, bro. God damn, you think it's just me and you in this conversation? At least like know your plays. At least like keep quiet if you don't know the details. Jesus Christ, dude. Holy shit. Shut the up. Oh, you're making it hard for me to understand where you're coming from because I keep saying how selfish I am. After hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been ruthlessly slaughtered in broad daylight after a 2-year genocide campaign, and I'm still going, oh, I don't know. Can you please educate me? Coming in here as though you're like genuinely, sincerely, charitably trying to understand the situation, and then simultaneously being like, well, why should I care? Okay, well, don't. I hope a similar fate that you think is not important befalls upon you and your family and your 7 generations, okay? Maybe then you'll care.
The difference with me was, you see,
seemingly because it's not that significant. No one should care about this, right? And maybe people won't care about you either.
Gaza was sealed off. How many people had a clue what was going on in Gaza? They just knew this place, Gaza. They didn't even know. Actually, most people didn't even have a clue that you weren't allowed to leave. Most people thought, why don't they just go somewhere else? Well, guess what? They couldn't. I knew too much. There was no way. I never for a moment hesitated them. My problem was very simple. I didn't know how to think it through. I knew I wouldn't condemn them, but I didn't know how to think through the argument. And I went through, I would say, a good week or more of real anguish and agony over, it's not just your feeling. How do I
pose the real question? What are you an advocate for that you've never been a victim of? Everything. Literally, I'm a straight, attractive white man in the United States of America. Virtually everything I advocate for does not impact me at all. That's unironically part of the reason why half of the animosity is directed towards me on the internet. They're like, oh, he must be a grifter because why does he care about anyone but himself? That is literally half of the argument from some of these epic dinguses. Yeah, and Rich too, on top of that. They literally can't comprehend it where they're like, dude, why do you give up? Why do you give up about this? Be like me. Don't give up about this. Be selfish. Why the fuck are you caring? Why do you care? Stop caring. You're going to urge me to care if you keep caring so hard. Shut up, you goddamn terrorist. Okay, bitch.
Persuade? How do I convince?
How does it feel that the walls are closing in? I wonder. I truly wonder. It's got to feel isolating. It's got to feel lonely. That like the only communities where you have this kind of attitude, where you can demonstrate this kind of attitude is like an increasingly smaller sliver of the internet. Didn't you support Hamas and Hezbollah? Like just an increasingly tinier sliver. At least like people that had this kind of attitude initially have realized that it's probably better to shut the fuck up. Okay? I support the resistance against the criminal state of Israel. Okay? Israel is a criminal enterprise. I support resisting genocide. I support resisting apartheid, both historically and in contemporary society. It's that simple. If you don't, that's a you problem. You can't just claiming and doing this, you love dead Palestinians, more fake outrage to push America bad. Like, how is this any different than Benjamin Netanyahu's statement? Oh, it's just, it makes us look bad. Dead Palestinians make us look bad. Okay, then stop. That's your fault. That's your problem. It makes you feel bad, and you can't get on the right side of this argument. You cannot get on the right side of this argument. You can't turn around and be like, it's actually up what Israel's doing, so I have to make it seem like Israel is a natural disaster, and therefore, you know, people on the opposing side of Israel are actually on the wrong side of this argument because they somehow love when Israel kills Palestinian children so they can farm outrage. You think I give a shit? I lost a third of my audience after October 7th. Suck my dick. Well, guess what? I'm from Iran and we don't want your support. Okay. I don't know why. Only someone who lives in America thinks that this is like a saving grace to be like, I'm from Iran. You think you're special? I don't give a f. It's the magician in the chat. It's Waluigi. He's in here. He's doing it. He's doing the damn thing. Ay, ay, ay. What is going on? Everything is breaking right now. Okay, we fixed it. Hold on. Waluigi Zadeg. Jesus. I'm also from Iran and I disagree with that chatter. There you go. Equilibrium. Equilibrium, baby. What now, Iranian chatter? Your lack of support has been eliminated. What do you do then? I see your personal anecdote and I increase it with multiple personal anecdotes. Interlocutors destroyed in the marketplace of ideas. And like I was saying though, the people that are complaining like you're a terrorist, like how does that work in your mind that like only in your circles online where like pedophiles, sex criminals, neo-Nazis, and people who align with them happen to think a certain way, but then virtually every established mainstream newspaper and publication filled to the brim with educated journalists and reporters feel the exact opposite way. Unless you personally think they're all also in on the conspiracy, that they are also terrorist supporters. Or perhaps you're just fucking wrong, you know? You might be. It's actually quite liberating to sometimes catch yourself in a lie and to recognize that it was wrong and to, you know, really reconsider the way you've seen something. If you just keep assuming the State Department position over and over and over again and just going, oh, dude, you're a terrorist, you're a real danger to American society, you're a terrorist, over and over again, like you can keep repeating that, but it's not going to make it more true. I think I have charity and I believe that you can actually make up your own conclusion. I think you can change your mind. I think you're all capable of doing that. You know, at a certain point, you got to stop and maybe go, man, we kept calling this motherfucker a terrorist. He's never been banned. Is it because there's like a global conspiracy to fucking uplift this person? And some people do actually take that leap instead. And they go into like QAnon. But for one guy, me, they go into like QAnon style conspiracies at this point where they're like, Hasan is blackmail on the CEO of Twitch. Hasan is blackmail on Jeff Bezos. Hasan is blackmail on every fucking media outlet. Turns into Q Hasan. Or maybe the guys who keep priming you up, tuning you up, angering you over and over again, do not have your best interest in mind and don't actually have a consistent, clear position. And they're just basically getting you angry so you can come in here and say that in here over and over again. But little by little, you lose a piece of yourself when you behave this way. Why are we engaging with these freaks? Because for as many freaks who are speaking out in the chat like that, there are probably 10, if not 100, who aren't speaking out, who might actually fucking learn the appropriate lesson from this. I'm not going to discount that, you know? I'm sure there are.